One thing that people can do a better job of on both sides is straight up asking, like, hey, why are you leaving your current agency? Hey, why did your last agency leave you? Why are you looking? What you got to be upfront about that. There's almost way too much like footsie and small talk and just, for lack of a better term, ass kissing in those first few agency or RFP meetings. Get down to the business and really understand what the struggles are on both sides so that you can just kind of lay your cards on the table before both sides end up investing more time, resources on the pitch.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am your host as well as your sponsor. Maybe that'll change after today. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers because finding great agencies is a time suck and a pain in the ass. Super excited today to be joined by Joe Artime, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Moooooooooes Southwest Grill, who is a part of Go-To Foods. Joe, how are we?
Good. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, no, we'll dive right in. What is an unpopular opinion or a hot take of sorts you have in the marketing world in general?
I think that
this is going to be good. I saw you clasp your hands like you're ready for some controversy. So
I think about kind of something that I talk to either other marketers or my team about, and one of the things that I always say is this. I don't know, popular held belief that I think has changed a little bit over time that marketing is kind of the lighter side of the business in terms of maybe, it's less math oriented. And one of the things I think I tell a lot of folks on my team and other folks I've worked with, don't be afraid of the math as marketers. In a way, looking at math, that's really just logic. And so the more you can kind of be willing to dive into the business, understand what the business drivers are, and then, use that to your advantage and apply it to whatever part of the marketing team and your tasks are. I think that will help make better decisions for the brand, for the company, and help make you, therefore, a better marketer and more marketable yourself, either as you advance your career or within your organization. So any of the folks, even if they're just true creatives, understanding kind of the math behind the business is something that I've seen be a huge unlock for folks as they're advancing their career.
I love it. I'm curious then, in that same vein of math and science, what's your take on attribution and how obsessive are you about marketing attribution?
I would say, here's kind of my thoughts on attribution. At the end of the day, we're judged on certain metrics, be that in whatever industry you're in. In the restaurant industry, it's sales and traffic, and so all the attribution metrics in the world are great. But if our sales and traffic aren't growing, if we're not growing relative to our competitors in the space, the industry at large, I don't. If I have good attribution metrics but terrible sales and traffic, that's still a loss for me. So our attribution metrics, it's definitely directional to figure out things like what creative is performing. Are we buying media more efficiently? But at the same time, the thing that I want to make sure about is that whatever type of media that we're buying, that it's driving our top line sales and traffic, because that's what's going to grow the business.
Yeah, I like it. I think a lot of people get obsessed with attribution. We talk about it a lot on this podcast, but I think that's a good point that I don't really think I've heard many people talk about. Is attribution's cool, but make sure it's driving to what actually matters for the business. So
absolutely.
You've spent the last decade or so of your career in franchise, multi-unit food, brands like Burger King, Crystal, Perkins, and now at Moooooooooes. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, and in particular, what have you seen, kind of the evolution of consumer behavior over that time, especially pre-COVID versus post-COVID?
Yeah, so like you said, I spent about the last 10 years or so in restaurants. So in that space, you've seen the explosion of digital purchases. So you think about maybe 10 years ago, every transaction you made in a restaurant was in store. Maybe you made some reservations if you were going out to eat at a nicer place. You made some of those online, but most purchases were made on site. And so like 7 or 8 years ago, you really started to see the advent, not just of like third-party delivery apps, but of restaurants building their own online ordering platforms. Then COVID hit, and these channels went from, just something that were, nice to have, and, they're a little bit ahead of the game technologically speaking, to a must-have. And so you saw restaurants literally stand up an entire tech stack overnight during COVID. And now you're at a place at, depending on your brand, anywhere from, call it 15% of your transactions to over 50% at some places are taking place online before the guest ever sets foot in your store, if they do at all. If they're a delivery only customer and never come to you, but are familiar with your brand only as kind of an avatar on an app, they might not ever experience the brand in store. So as a marketer, I think that's a blessing and a curse. You have all this data on your longtime guests, how they interact with your brand, but it also means you have to talk to them in a way that's more sophisticated than in times past, but also more complex. I guess back in the day, you were able to just buy 2 or 3 channels, load up on as many, as much impressions as you could potentially get on those. And now you really have to understand, kind of a channel strategy. If you need, figuring out kind of that right balance between spreading yourself too thin versus, going all in on a channel or two. And so, all that data can kind of be both. There's upsides and downsides to it, but that's the big thing that I've seen over the last 10 years, and especially in the restaurant space. We're not exactly direct to consumer as of yet, but the explosion of those type of transactions has definitely changed marketing in that space over the last decade.
Do you think I'm curious, do you think you can win, and maybe you have the data on this directly, can you win a customer who's never experienced you in store to try for the very first time through third-party delivery and stuff like that? Like at enough of a click to focus on it?
I actually think so. I think that if you look at those third-party delivery apps, there's some folks that are absolutely they're third-party delivery customers. And the way that they view some of these brands on here is just through their portal, where they are ordering their food from anywhere from 1 to upwards of 10 plus times a week. And so to them, that's part of your brand. That's part of your restaurant experience. Moe's or any of the other brands, they understand kind of, is the food I'm going to get served in, in packaging that kind of keeps my meal warm and enjoyable to eat. Is it going to get here on time? I know that we have to make our stores have a good experience for the dasher or whoever's coming to pick up the food so that they can get it in a timely fashion, making sure it's packaged properly, and so it can get to our guests quickly. Sometimes that's offering them promotions. If they know that they can always get a good promotion from coming to our location or another location. So it's not necessarily that they're not experiencing your brand. They might now be aware of your brand because of these apps. They might now be able to interact with your brand on social or whatever, but it just so happens that the way that they consume food is through these third-party apps, in which case it makes sense to just make sure that your experience on those apps is good, because if you're not on those, you're losing that customer. So, they might not be coming into the stores, they might not be seeing all the nice artwork that you've got in there, but they do experience your brand. It's just, from their couch rather than in the store.
Does that make you nervous about having, I didn't ever think of it until you just said that, of like splitting the experience with somebody else, essentially. If you have a great experience and a dasher comes and gets it, for example, and then, the food slides around in the back seat or something like that, for a bad example. Like, does that keep you up at night?
It does. But also that's kind of the case for everybody else on those apps. And so it's, you don't want to say it's a level playing field, because you never want to lose that control that's happening. But at the same time, you need to take all of the steps that you potentially can, either through kind of working within those apps to put out a good, a channel strategy / marketing program, and also making sure the in-store experience, so that when it's delivered, you can do as much as you can to make sure that, as it gets to the guest, it's in the best possible scenario, and you've mitigated all the risk that comes from somebody else handling your food for a couple of minutes.
No, I like it. Makes total sense. Control what you can control in this world and every other area.
Chips fall where they may.
Yeah. The biggest thing I hear lately, most of the year, but more so now, I think since it's towards end of year and people trying to figure out planning for next year, is that marketers are being asked to do more with less. Budgets are getting cut. People need to be more efficient, all that sort of stuff. What's your best piece of advice to other marketing leaders out there on how to get through the rest of this year and thrive coming into 2025?
Yeah, Daniel, it's sometimes in marketing, people, you get a little bit myopic and be like, in marketing, we're constantly getting screwed. You look at people in other industries, it's kind of the same thing. There's a lot of folks being asked to do more with less. You think about industries that have been completely turned up and disrupted over the last, call it decade plus. And then even just the cycles that tech has been going through over the last like 5 years, the ups and the downs there. So, I know a lot of different folks in different industries that are being asked to do the same thing. So as to the advice with marketers, and it's kind of the same thing that I was speaking to earlier, understand the business drivers, understand what grows your business and the ways that you can impact that. So an example, I guess, would be, don't feel siloed in your specific area, be that creative, social, CRM, etc. Because, keeping with that less is more theme, there's a good chance you're going to be asked to do something, outside of your function that will deliver results. So make sure you can speak to that. Make sure you've got kind of a willingness to learn. And that kind of makes you more valuable as an employee, as we're all being asked to do a little bit more with less.
I like it. Most folks in your role that I speak to are getting hit up 7,000 times a day across all platforms, social, cell phone, email, the whole shebang. Is that the case for you?
It is, but I don't mind it. Everyone's got a job to do, man.
I don't hate it. I'm curious. Yeah, I think it's a good way to think of it, that you don't hate it and that everybody does have a job. I'm curious, what's your advice to folks who do, every agency on the planet hypothetically wants to work with quote unquote cool brands. And I know food and restaurant brands are, highly visible, and everybody has, usually a story, some sort of nostalgia. But I'm curious, if you're not in market, for, say, an agency or vendor, are you open to taking calls with agencies and vendors? Yeah. Is there anything somebody can do or say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I keep shooting a shot. It's tough. I admire the sales folks out there. And, my theory on it is it takes, 2 seconds to either delete an email, respond back, hey, not interested right now, thank you, or just say, hey, I can't call back at this time, feel free to email me. So I don't mind it as some massive interruption. As for agencies, what I like to see, honestly, is the work, bring the receipts. What are some groundbreaking work you've done for clients, whether that's building a website with an amazing interface, some compelling creative that you've done, or just innovation in planning and buying that help grow the business. I love hearing those success stories. And it makes that email or phone call easier to respond to, even if just to say, hey, I really enjoyed this work. Keep it up. Let's stay in touch. I think some of the agencies that I've, eventually worked with were ones that, put themselves out there initially, even when we're not necessarily looking, saying, hey, look at this stuff we've done. At least that makes a name for yourself. And you remember, hey, they're the ones who did that really cool campaign for X, Y, and Z. Hey, I know somebody that's looking for somebody, you should reach out to them, which I guess your whole business is based off of. But that's kind of that's the plan, Exactly. And but just show the work. If you're just going to put like 3 lines in email, we work with X, Y, and Z. I want to actually know kind of what you did for them. Because everyone's, every single agency, RFP or the pitch deck has that slide of every brand they've worked for under the sun. There's a lot of the same brands on there for every single agency. So, actually showing the work is kind of this level up that I really want to see.
Yeah, those, I always say that those logo grids need a little bit of context for many agencies.
What was a project versus somebody who you actually had on retainer? Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've seen a big shift in the agency side, especially since COVID, of bigger or named brands that have name recognition moving towards smaller specialized agencies, typically independent, that are good at, say, or specialize in 1 or 2 things. Have you seen that? And what's your kind of opinion of full service versus smaller specialized?
Yeah, I've seen both. The best agencies, I like to think of them as just kind of an extension of your team that has to work together. So just like there might be sub departments within marketing that need to work together to meet deadlines and push the business forward, if the agencies are an extension of your team, and I believe the best ones are and view themselves that way, they should work together to hold each other accountable without having, quote unquote, the client be kind of the middleman that you're kind of going back and forth on. Hey, we delivered our piece. We're waiting for so-and-so to do this. They should feel comfortable enough to work together. So as long as you've got the right partners in place for that, I think it makes a lot of sense to allow people to kind of work on their area of subject matter expertise. and make sure they're holding each other accountable, just like members of our marketing team would. So I'm all for that trend. And I've also had the full service agencies that I think work well also. So, whatever works right for the client, obviously, and for the agencies themselves, I should say.
Yeah, I'm curious if you have a tip for kind of that agency harmony you discussed, because I find, truthfully, like the biggest thing I hear from both brands or from agencies on every slide deck is, oh, we act as an extension of your team. And every marketer says, yeah, we want an agency that's an extension of our team. But I feel so few get to that spot where it's actually that. It's more like a talking point. Do you have, any sort of tactics or advice on how to achieve that?
Yeah, I think, and this is kind of, basic / mundane. But, inviting them to meetings is something that's super simple. And I'll try to think about this from the agency point of view. So you have your agency partners. They work throughout their career. They've been in multiple different industries. They understand a little bit about a lot of different industries, which is great, and that knowledge ends up being valuable for them to bring kind of outside expertise. But also they can never truly like be embedded in the way that your team members are, where they're kind of thinking about this one business over and over again. So a lot of times when you have people that are on your account and maybe they're the only account that their agency folk is working on, I like inviting those people to just internal meetings that we've got about the business, where we kind of go over the results, what's working, what isn't. From what I can tell, that helps them understand what the actual business is, what the goals we're working to, so that they're thinking about it from the point of view of one of the folks sitting on the team rather than just the agency. So as they go back to their creative team or their agent, their account supervisor, that sort of thing, they have the ability to say, hey, these are the things the client is really focused on versus just here's what's in our scope, here's what we're delivering. So that's kind of a very simple and what seems like an obvious thing, but I think a lot of people fail to do it because, they think like, hey, we're not trying to load up meetings for somebody that doesn't technically report to us. Well, if they're a member of your team, they should be in those meetings. And they should know kind of what the important stuff is to you versus just what a list of deliverables are. And the thing that I've seen actually be the outcome of that, we all get sent articles, in any industry you're in, your agency will send you an article and it'll be like, hey, check out what, this brand did. And you're like, yeah, I saw that, 5 days ago when it first came out because I'm overly on top of all this stuff. And over time, what you end up seeing is as that person becomes more embedded in your team, what your goals are, what your industry is, what you're looking at, they end up sending those articles to you the day those come out versus something that they saw, on social 5 days later. So that's kind of the way that you see it's working as kind of there becomes that better timing between kind of what they're looking at versus what we're looking at.
Yeah, I would argue like every piece of advice that I give to agencies, I generally start with this is going to be super boring and like non-groundbreaking and mundane stuff. But yeah, like the simple stuff, like you said, not a lot of folks do. And I feel like some agencies who I would lump in the, overarching category of not the type of agency I would want to work with, they see those often as a time suck, as like, ugh, they're inviting us to another meeting, and we have to waste time and resources and stuff like that versus doing the work. Or can we bill for this meeting? That sort of thing. So I get it that some are presumably like that and unnecessary. But to your point, yeah, like the more you can invite somebody into those, they also just feel like better about the relationship, I would say, as well.
Absolutely. They become more invested. And I mean, no one wants another meeting. Hell, the people on the marketing team who have to go to these meetings don't want to be in that meeting. But, it does help.
Yeah. Can you think of a really great agency experience you've had in the past at some point in your career and what made it so great?
Yeah, my first job out of school was actually at an agency. So that was a great experience for me because it made me learn.
We don't get this. I never get this side of working at an agency. Okay.
Yeah, it made me learn I wanted to go to the brand. The brand side.
That's a positive outcome.
No, but seriously, when I was at that agency, like I got to see the best of client service. I got to see, and just simple things like I remember, one of my older bosses, he was like, speak up more in meetings. Like don't just be a wallflower. That was, important advice that I got really early on in my career. I saw kind of the how they delivered, best in class customer service. And so, while I realized like, hey, it made me want to be on the brand side because again, you were invested in those brands. I thought we were delivering great customer service, but I actually wanted to, have the email address that said at the actual brand I'm working for versus the agency that I'm pitching on behalf of. So that was an invaluable experience for me. And then the other great experiences I talked about the extension of the team thing. That's when it ends up being, those great experiences. And a couple of times I've come into brands that were, call it in the turnaround stage or rebuilding the marketing team. And you come in and the agency is doing so much. They're doing stuff way out of scope. They're basically, members of the marketing team. Some of them are actually working in the office. Some of them are on the phone with franchisees on a regular basis. And they're almost kind of holding down the fort until you have to come in and kind of reorganize stuff. So those are the folks that, do that kind of mentality of, hey, we're going, and, part of it is self-serving. They're doing it to, stay within the business and make themselves more valuable. But at the same time, I think back on those and how they really helped with my onboarding and bringing me up to speed. Those are kind of the partners that, you feel like you feel because they have that same level of investment that you do. So you can trust them in a way versus somebody you're just trying to pitch and start a new relationship with and keep them over there in a silo. And you're the expert versus them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point too. Like, I think it's totally fine to have a self-serving layer of the relationship, because again, if you do great work and you service your clients well, you will get more business. Your current clients will refer you to people that they know, or when they go to new jobs, they will bring you along and stuff like that. So I think as a brand, they should actually want an agency that's a little bit self-serving. They should want to help and further the brand and stuff like that. But yeah, like they should. Great brands should want to see their agency partners, win new business and stuff like that, and be able to hire more and have, more revenue and stuff like that to do cooler stuff for them as well. So I think that's 100%. An interesting point.
Absolutely.
Can you think of a negative agency experience that you've had, and what made it so poor?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some agencies that are bad fits, and I don't know. You know how like when you've got, call it, two friends and then they become a couple and sometimes they just don't work for whatever reason. And they might be great people, they might get along, but together they're not a fit. You see that kind of on the agency and the brand side. Great people on the brand side, great people on the agency side, but they just don't work together for whatever reason. I've been experienced with that. Sometimes I would say that, I've been on the part where we were probably a little bit more of a difficult client than we needed to be or we should have been. And I've seen folks where agencies come in with just completely different expectations. And I think a lot of that really needs to be laid up front during the pitching process to understand the expectations on both sides. I know, I'm very appreciative when, going through the pitching process where agencies will be upfront and say like, they're realistic about, hey, I don't think we're the right fit because X, Y, and Z, or and what they're really saying is your expectations are crazy out of whack for what you're trying to pay us. But at the same time, at least they're letting it be known up front versus, hey, we're going to take this billing. And then, if we're not going to deliver, well, at least, they already invested in us and we can mark this out for 7 to 9 months of billing. Like that. That's not ideal for anybody, and that's when those breakdowns occur. So I think just being upfront on both sides of what the expectations are, kind of, what kind of reporting you're going to need, what, the expectations are going to be in terms of business results, what they're going to be responsible, and what they're ultimately going to be judged on. So you go back to the attribution topic, if you're just saying, oh yeah, this attribution looks great, this is great, this is great, this is great, and the agency thinks, cool, we're just going to like flood them with attribution and show how great our attribution models are. And then, you come to them 6 months in and you're like, traffic is down. Even though you've been telling me how great your attribution was for the last 6 months. And they're like, okay, well, they don't necessarily know that that's what they're ultimately going to be judged on. So, I think being upfront about that on the front end goes a long way to just making sure that relationship isn't disastrous from the jump.
Yeah, it's the number one reason I hear from folks in your position of why they're firing or getting rid of their current agency or parting ways in some regard is misaligned expectations. We thought this, they thought that, and neither party are right, truthfully. Like there was just a miscommunication at some point that led to misaligned expectations or not speaking enough, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that people can do a better job of on both sides is straight up asking like, hey, why are you leaving your current agency? Hey, why did your last agency leave you? Why are you looking? You got to be upfront about that. There's almost way too much like footsie and small talk and just, for lack of a better term, ass kissing on those first few agency or RFP meetings. Get down to the business and really understand what the struggles are on both sides so that you can just kind of lay your cards on the table before both sides end up investing more time, resources on the pitch.
Yeah, it's honestly, I get a lot of that from the folks in your position, and I often say, like, you should share that with the agencies, and they won't, or they don't want to until I convince them sometimes, or sometimes they won't. Like, they don't, I don't know, it's like a mental block or something like that they shouldn't be that forthcoming or something like that. But I get the, like, crazy stories of, we're firing them for this. I'm like, oh my God, like that's insane. You should definitely share that with the current agencies so that they don't do that as well, or like that they don't repeat that and stuff. And most of the times they don't want to, I feel like.
Yeah, people really want to guard that stuff, or they don't want to, air dirty laundry and that sort of thing. And I think there's a way to do that without. And again, it comes back to just you're not gonna throw somebody out because you hear one horrible recommendation. People can hopefully give the context of here's what we did right, here's what they did right, and here's what each side did wrong, and here's just why it didn't work out. Kind of being adults about it versus just throwing somebody one side or another completely under the bus.
I think that's actually the biggest risk for agencies, like in this current landscape we're in. I see it all the time on LinkedIn and different communities I'm in. Somebody will ask for an agency recommendation, or they'll ask if anybody has heard of a certain agency, and there's no context to the ask, right? Nothing about budget or any reason why.
Right.
And on the negative side, on the times where they'll be like, hey, has anybody heard of X agency? Somebody will say, yes, I had a terrible experience with them. Don't work with them, right? And the person will go, okay. And like that agency was just shamed in front of, hundreds of CMOs and stuff like that with zero context as to what happened. On the flip side, people will say, hey, I need a creative agency with no context around what it is or budget or timing or anything like that. And people will list a bunch of ones. And I can see some of them. I'll say, like, there's no way that is a fit for that brand. Or like nobody asks questions. And the marketer wastes so much time and energy, like having conversations with agencies that are clearly not a fit and stuff like that. So I think that's an interesting point you've brought up several times around like the context around these things matters so much.
Yeah, it's almost like the process gets too formalized. And people are like, all right, this is step one, now it's step two. Sometimes you just have to, and I've had bosses that actually have been great about this, and that's one of the things that I've really learned is sometimes just pick up the phone and have like ad hoc conversations with these agencies as you're going along. Because eventually, if they become your agency, you're going to be randomly picking up the phone and talking to them and being like, hey, this is kind of where the business is. This is one thing we're changing, this is one thing we're thinking about. If you have those conversations on the front end versus taking it out of the formalized step-by-step process, you kind of get a sneak peek of what the actual working relationship is going to be like.
Yeah, you're giving away all my secrets that I tell my agencies to do. No, I mean, it's like, again, none of these things are like groundbreaking things. I tell them all the time, like in between portions of the process, I'm like, call, just like build some more rapport. They're like, about what? I'm like, if I've got to like explain to you how to have a conversation with somebody you might want to work with, like, this isn't going to go well. But
hey, how's the business going? Have you seen? What have you seen in the last 30 days since?
Come up with a couple questions. We saw this here, and we were curious your thoughts on it. Again, just to show your thinking and stuff like that. But yeah, to your point, like artificially creating relevant touch points is like the name of the game, especially in an RFP process.
Absolutely.
What are you most excited about in the marketing space at the moment? Outside of AI, I hear about it too much.
Yeah, me too, man. Of course. It's funny in these kind of settings. You almost sound ridiculous if you're like, not really excited about AI. Not buying it. AI, machine learning, of course. I guess besides that, I'm encouraged by some of the course correction you're seeing out there, where a lot of brands, including some of the big ones, are willing to say, not everything is a digital transaction. There's still a prominent place for brand building, compelling creative, and more kind of grassroots traditional marketing. Now, one thing I will say, the parameters around what creative is relevant or what local activations drive interest, that's changed. But that's always going to be the case. You're always going to kind of see marketing. Well, what used to be a 30 to 60 second spot makes zero sense now for a brand that maybe hasn't even changed that much. It's just the way people consume different types of content. But it's encouraging to see that those type of tactics still have a place. The kind of local activations, grassroots marketing that might have been done by field marketing in the past, as well as just really compelling creative that shows your brand in an interesting and unique way. It's awesome to see that still have a place out there and not have everything go to this DTC or digital transaction world. That's still really excited, the machine learning and the targeting that you can do. But, is it as interesting to me as seeing what some of the really compelling creative that other brands are doing out there? That's way more intriguing and encouraging to see for me.
I like it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, what keeps you up at night from a business standpoint?
I work in restaurant marketing, and there's always more restaurants being built, which is great. You love to see kind of, brands grow, consumers have more choices as to where they want to go out to eat. But it means that, in order to, the amount of meals that people are having, isn't necessarily growing at the same rate. So it means you have to steal share in order to grow your business. And that makes, as somebody who's a fairly competitive person, that makes my job exciting to see. When sales and traffic come out, I like to see how we performed the previous, day, the previous week, and kind of understand, and if we need to adjust plans or continue to do things, see what's working, see what's not. I enjoy seeing that team's hard work pay off in results. So those are the things I don't necessarily know about keeping up at night, but those are the things that kind of keep us going and allow us to make informed decisions as we do our job.
You constantly keeping an eye on folks in your space, or you try to stay in your lane and do your own thing and not let the noise influence you?
I could lie and say I'm not looking at what other folks do, but it's interesting to me. It's interesting to me to see like kind of what people are doing, people with bigger budgets, people with smaller budgets, people in the restaurant space, people out, in different industries I find compelling. I've never worked in B2B, for instance, so I'm always super intrigued whenever I meet kind of a B2B marketer and kind of understanding how they're able to, you talk about stuff, trying to put something in layman's terms to get people to understand it. I'm really impressed whenever I meet a B2B marketer who's kind of, doing interesting stuff in that space. So I always like seeing what else is out there. Because I think that's how you make yourself a better marketer. That's how you make more informed decisions, and think kind of outside your silos. So yes, while I believe in staying the course of our plan, making sure that our plan takes into account everything that we might be facing in terms of headwinds coming down the road, and making sure that we stay true to our plan. Always have to be looking at what other folks are doing. I won't deny that I'm constantly looking at that.
I like it. We'll finish with some fun ones here. What was your very first job?
My earliest memory of the labor force, if you want to call it that, my grandparents owned a really small grocery store, like a neighborhood grocery store when I was a kid. So I remember dusting the shelves at my grandfather's grocery store when I was, super young. And then when I was 15 and able to finally get a payroll job, I worked as a bagger and basically cart boy at Kroger. So like the summer heat outside on the blacktop pavement, like pulling in carts all summer, minimum wage, friggin' miserable. The next summer I got a job at a restaurant and continued to work at restaurants all throughout high school and college, and never went back to the grocery store life ever again. So
that manual labor life, you've got a cushy gig now,
Yeah, definitely. Hey, that's why I always, anytime you're out in the lot, I always take the cart back inside, man. Just 100%. For that reason, because I remember those days out in the parking lot in the middle of the summer. Oof.
What would your final meal be?
So I recently had a birthday, and that's kind of the same question as like your wife asks you, like, hey, where do you want to go for your? And I just wanted pizza. I wanted, just a. New York style pizza, even the fancy pizzas that Atlanta's got a lot of great pizza places around town. That's just what I wanted. So if that's what I wanted on my birthday when I could have had any meal, I assume that's what I would take for my final meal as well.
Okay, fair enough. And who is somebody who inspires you personally, professionally, or both?
Yeah. So personally, I could say. I'm going to say both my parents. Like, I don't think it's funny. I remember one time doing an icebreaker where they're like, hey, where do you get kind of your work ethic from or whatnot? And everyone just went around the table and said, how much they learned about hard work from their dad and whatnot. And I was like, cool. So, you rarely see people be like, yeah, no, parents super lazy, no work ethic whatsoever, and here I am. So I'm very fortunate to have had two parents that showed me kind of the value of hard work and continuing trying and really trying to do as much work as possible to sacrifice for your family, but also being there present for your family, which is something I try to model myself in my personal life after. And then, professionally, I've been super fortunate, even in early on in my career. I mentioned the agency, which, I quickly learned after a couple of years wasn't for me. Like I said, learning from those folks early on, the folks at the agency that, best in class customer service, I truly believe that. And then, working at, I worked at the Princeton Review, which is a test prep services company, a field that I have absolutely zero interest in. But at the same time, worked with some bosses that really cared about you as people. And then, you were able to kind of learn, again, it's always fun to learn industries that you're not necessarily interested in. I think that helps you in the long run. And then over my time in restaurant marketing, having bosses that are willing to take a chance on you. I remember one of my jobs, I had almost no experience doing any sort of media buying. And I had that part of the business thrust upon me. And it very well could have gone poorly, but I had a boss that was willing to, sit down. He called it, I'd walk in and he'd be given a stack of flowcharts, and he'd fun with flowcharts. And we'd just go through flowcharts and talk about, whether to plus up and cut up media. And so having those bosses that are willing to take the time, teach the business to you, and kind of bring you along, but also kind of give you the freedom to kind of learn from your mistakes and kind of take chances on the platforms and or ideas that you have. Those are the folks that have really inspired me, and I've really been fortunate to kind of have that along every step of the way thus far in my career. So there's too many of those guys to name, but it's been great to work for them.
That's awesome. That's all I got for you. What before we leave? What any new menu items or anything that people should know about Moooooooooes before we go?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when you're launching this, but this Friday,
next week or 2 weeks
beautiful.
from now, something like that.
All right, so yeah, on October 4th, we're actually launching chili crisp chicken at Moooooooooes. It's a brand new product. One of our proteins. We've had some really successful launches this year with birria, then tequila lime chicken. This is a new upcoming trending flavor. We're really excited to put it in stores and see how our guests enjoy it, and always trying to kind of, push the letter on innovation and bringing, compelling reasons for folks to come back and enjoy Moooooooooes. We're known for, flavors and our atmosphere in stores, and this is a product I think goes really well with the brand. So I'm excited for people to try it.
Chili crisp chicken it is. Love it. Thank you very much for joining. This was awesome.
Hey, Daniel, thank you for having me. Really enjoy the stuff you're doing here, man.
Thanks.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.